Karma Yoga, action in Krishna consciousness. Nadate kasitit papam na papam sikritim vibhu agyane navritam jnanam tena muyanti jantava. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. So let's begin with offering our obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tenamane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Kauravani Bicharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Askatyade Siddharane. So Prabhupada's purport. The Sanskrit word vibhu means the Supreme Lord who is full of unlimited knowledge, riches, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation. He is always satisfied in himself, undisturbed by sinful or pious activities. He does not create a particular situation for any living entity, but the living entity, bewildered by ignorance, desires to be put into certain conditions of life, and therefore his chain of action and reaction begins. The living entity is by superior nature, full of knowledge. Nevertheless, he is prone to be influenced by ignorance due to his limited power. The Lord is omnipotent, but the living entity is not. The Lord is vibhu, or omniscient, but the living entity is anu, or atomic. Because he is a living soul, he has the capacity to desire by his free will. Such desire is fulfilled only by the omnipotent Lord. And so when the living entity is bewildered in his desires, the Lord allows him to fulfill those desires. The Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of the particular situation which may be desired. Being in a bewildered condition, therefore, the embodied soul identifies himself with a circumstantial material body and becomes subjected to the temporary misery and happiness of life. The Lord is the constant companion of the living entity is Paramatma, or the super soul, and therefore he can understand the desires of the individual soul as one could smell the flavor of a flower by being near it. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning the living entity. The Lord fulfills his desire as he deserves. Man proposes and God disposes. The living entity is the individual is not, therefore, omnipotent in fulfilling his desires. The Lord, however, can fulfill all desires, and the Lord, being neutral to everyone, does not interfere with the desires of the minute, independent living entities. However, when one desires Krishna, the Lord takes special care and encourages one to desire in such a way that one can attain to him and be eternally happy. The Vedic hymns therefore declare, Esha u yeva sadhu karma karayati tam yam evyo lokebya nishite. Esha u eva sadhu karma karati yam ado ninishite. The Lord engages the living entity in pious activities, so he may be elevated. The Lord engages him in impious activities, so he may go to hell. Kaushik Taki Upanishad 3.8. Agyo Jantur Anisho Yam Atmana Sukha Tukayo Ishvara Prerito Gachet Svargam Vash Vabhudram Evacha. The living entity is completely dependent in his distress and happiness. By the will of the Supreme, he can go to heaven or hell, as a cloud is driven by the air. Therefore, the embodied soul, by his immemorial desire to avoid Krishna consciousness, causes his own bewilderment. Consequently, although he is constitutionally eternal, blissful, and cognizant, due to the littleness of his existence, he forgets his constitutional position of service to the Lord and is thus entrapped by nescience. And under the spell of ignorance, the living entity claims that the Lord is responsible for his conditional existence. The Vedanta Sutras 2.134 also confirm this. Vaishamya nirgrine na sapek shatvat tata hi darshiti. The Lord neither hates nor likes anyone, though he appears to. So the verse again, nadate kasichit papam nat papam sukritim vibhu agyana navritam gyana tena moyati jantava. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Here, Krishna is explaining to us how we can become detached from our material circumstances. Material life is something like watching a movie. When one is watching the movie, one is not actually involved in the activities that are going on in the movie, but due to identification with someone in the movie, one has certain experiences, either happiness or distress, depending upon what the character is going through. Similarly, as we've heard many times, we're not this body, nor are we even this subtle mind. But due to our identification with the body, gross and subtle, therefore we experience either happiness or distress, heat or cold, honor and dishonor, etc. This is due to our being covered by the illusory energy of Krishna. Still, there is a process by which one can gradually become uncovered from illusion. And that process is to become conscious of Krishna. And the method of becoming conscious of Krishna is through devotional service. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhakti yamam abhijananti yavan yaschasmi tatvataha tato mam tatvato gyatva vishite tat anantara. That one can understand me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only through the process of devotional service. And when one is engaged in such a process, one can enter into the mysteries of my understanding. Devotional service, as we know, begins with hearing. Hearing principally about the soul, the super soul, and the process of becoming conscious of the super soul through devotional service. Bhagavad Gita deals with 5 subject matters, namely Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, the Jiva, ourselves, the living entities, Kala, time, Prakriti, the material nature, and Karma, activities that bind one to the material existence. So anyone who's taken a material body has taken so because of our past activities. And along with the particular modes of nature that we acquire a certain conception of life. The conception of life is determined by the modes of nature that we're under. Now, Sattva Narupa Sarvasha Shradha Bhavati Bharata Shadoma Yoyam Purusho Yoyats Charas Eva Saha. That the living entity, Sattva Narupa Sarvasha, that according to the modes of material nature we've acquired, we have a certain conception of life. And of course, according to that conception of life, we'll act. And according to how we act, we become covered or uncovered from the material illusion that we're under. And therefore, we develop another conception of life corresponding to the subsequent mode of nature that we become covered by. Now, fortunately, those who are aspiring to become devotees of Krishna, they can understand to some extent or another that this present existence is not our normal condition of life. And therefore, they make some endeavor to learn the science of changing one's desire. Krishna consciousness depends upon simply changing our desire from Krishna, from something other than Krishna to Krishna. Of course, there is nothing in this world or in any world which is apart or different from Krishna. But the basic desire of the living entity in the material world is to imitate, however big or small, Krishna. As it says in Bhagavad Gita, Ischcha dvesha samutena dvandva mohena varada sarva bhutani samyogam sargayanti parantapa. That all living entities are born into delusion, overcome by desire and hate. And basically speaking, as Prabhupada writes in the purport, we desire to enjoy the material world in some way or another. Just like today is the Sunday feast, and some of us, at some temples at least, some of us may attend the Sunday feast, and if there is prasadam, we generally take prasadam, not only as a service, but there's some amount of enjoyment there too, hopefully. And in order to enjoy the prasadam, we generally have to pick it up with our hand and control it. If our hand is shaking too much and we can't control it, it's very difficult to find it, how to put it into our mouth in order to chew it and taste it and enjoy it. So in any enjoyment, there has to be some kind of control in order to experience it. So basically speaking, those in the material world, they're looking around, for instance, in modern Western society at least, and perhaps in other societies, the whole world is seen as one big toy factory. In many parts of the world, you go outside, it is simply one store after another, trying to advertise, come and enjoy, come and enjoy. All you need is a little bit of money. And if you don't have money, if you have a credit card, that's just as good, because you can pay it back in your next lifetime. So come and buy this thing with your money, your gold or paper money, whatever it might be, and enjoy. This is called Haranya Kashipu. Hiranya means gold, and Kashipu means soft bed. So if you have enough gold, you can buy a soft bed. Now, of course, in the material world, it is necessary to serve this body to one degree or another, because without this body, we can't perform devotional service. As a matter of fact, we can't do anything without a body at the present time. Those who don't have a body, they're called ghosts. Ghosts can do things, but generally speaking, most ghosts are not very productive, either materially or spiritually. Therefore, we have to serve this body to the extent that's necessary. Otherwise, we won't have it very long. But still, one should understand that the purpose of serving the senses is in order to utilize this body to the greatest extent we can in Krishna's service. Because only by utilizing our body, our mind, our words, our faith, and our refuge in Krishna's service, can we begin to see things, can Krishna be pleased with us? And therefore, when he sees we're sincerely trying to develop a desire to obtain him, he can reveal himself proportionally. Krishna very much wants to associate with us. That's why he's been accompanying us since time immemorial as a super soul. He's been trying to have a conversation with us. The problem is we don't listen very much. We listen, but not so much to what Krishna wants to say. Krishna is telling us in Bhagavad Gita, first of all, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Videshe Arjuna Tishtati Brahmanyan Sarvabhutani Yantra Rudani Maya. That actually Krishna is always with us. Now it's, in some parts of the world, it's Christmas. So Santa Claus has become a hero in many parts of the world, Father Noel. And Father Noel, supposedly, he knows each one of the children, about each one of the children, whether they're good or bad. I don't know if in Russia they have, do they have Santa Claus in Russia? Yes? Yes. So Santa Claus, he's the super soul, at least in the heart of all the children, because he knows if they're good or bad. And therefore it's an impetus for the children to be always good, because then Santa Claus will give them presents on Christmas or whatever day you celebrate Christmas. Sometimes they celebrate it. I think in Russia it's a little bit later than 25th of December. It's like in January sometime, Christmas. Когда Рождество по России. When is Christmas in Russia?
января. 7 января Рождество.
From the night 6 to 7.
The 7th of January. How to show. So the children have to wait a little bit longer for their presents, but separation makes the heart grow fonder. In any case, supposedly they only get the presents if they've been good. Similarly, well, Santa Claus is just an expansion, if you believe he exists, of the actual super soul who's in everyone's heart. And he senses our desire, just like one can understand the flavor of a flower by smelling it. Now, neither the soul, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, anaditvam nirgunadvat paramatmayam avyam sharira stopi konteya nakaroti natnalipyate. That those who can see with the eyes of eternity can see that the soul is transcendental. So that's good news. We're all transcendental. to the material nature. It may not feel like that, but after all, we can experience that in spite of all the problems, all the changes my body has gone through, I remain the same person. The body, of course, is not the same, but I'm the same. I'm the same person who's experiencing whatever my body and mind are going through. Sometimes it's relatively pleasant, sometimes unpleasant. But that doesn't mean it's affecting me. It's affecting my experience. So the soul is, we're all transcendental, we're all eternal, and we're beyond the modes of material nature. And in spite of contact with this material body or Arjuna, the soul is neither doing anything nor is he entangled. So we're all kind of lazy in the material world. We're just kind of observing. But when a fly goes onto the web, the fly can't do very much, but he's stuck. He's just waiting for the spider to come and greet him. Welcome to the web. You're in time for lunch. And you happen to be on the menu. Similarly, we've been trapped on the web of material existence. And we're just waiting for the spider of time, or call it, to come and eat us. So we can go on to another body, maybe a better body, maybe an inferior body, where we can again go through the same process of hoping to gratify our senses in the 8,400,000 species of life. And whatever body we get, we accompanying that body are desires. And the soul in the human form of life has the capacity to decide which desire to fulfill. There's some discrimination. For instance, if you go to the feast or you have a big meal, you can decide whether or not how much one wants to gratify the senses. If there is a nice gloved onions on the plate and you eat one and you decide it tastes very good, let me eat one more. And then after that, one more. But at some point, intelligence may kick in and say, maybe it's a good idea not to eat another one. But the mind and the senses may demand, my dear soul, don't be so austere. You only live once. This may be your last day. You should always think, this may be my last moment. And you should utilize it properly by eating just one more, or maybe two more. Or the intelligence may say, well, I may live a little bit longer than after this meal, and I might get sick if I eat another one. Maybe it's better I restrain my senses and do something else other than eating gloved onions. I know one devotee, he was in a contest of eating gloved onions, and what they were doing, they were throwing the gloved onions, and they had to catch them with their mouth. So he broke the record eating gloved onions. He ate 90 gloved onions. And then he got a free ride to the hospital where they tried to recover his consciousness. Therefore, intelligence is there in order to tell us how much we have to serve our senses and how much we have to restrict them. Now, the soul, he has to discern these things with his intelligence. Other than that, the mind, as it says in one verse, kamadinam katida palitas dorni deshas. That in so many different ways, kama I've been serving. Now, kama will never tell us, Maya never tells us, my dear soul, you've been working so hard to serve me since time immemorial that I should be merciful to you and give you a week off. This week, no more service to your senses or your mind. You can relax. Maya never says that. Or even if we do something which we shouldn't be doing, Maya usually doesn't say, my dear soul, I told you to do something which was wrong. I'm sorry, I'll never tell you again. I told you to eat that extra glubdamin. You got sick. I'll never ask you to eat more food than necessary from now on. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Maya will never say that. Maya will say, you rascal. Look at everyone else. They're serving their senses much better than you are. Why don't you serve me? You don't love me? You don't appreciate me? I've been with you since time immemorial. Even your mother won't go with you to the next body, but I'm going to be with you forever in this material world. You should develop a better service attitude towards me, like everyone else has. So generally speaking, one is never embarrassed by what everyone does in the material world. Maya will always give somewhat rationalization so that one feels justified. For instance, there's a tribe in South Africa. Their philosophy is, if you're alive, you're a good person. And if you're dead, you're a bad person. So if you kill your enemy, you're a good person. And because they died, they're a bad person. So it was good that you killed them because they're bad, because they're dead. And you must be good because you're still alive. So a very simple philosophy. You don't have to go to school very much and study in order to be good, feel good. Just stay alive and you feel good. So Maya is like that. She never tells us we did anything wrong, generally speaking. It's Krishna as our consciousness or conscience that bothers us. But Maya will just tell us, don't listen to that conscience. Just ignore it, because you're a good person, because you're alive. And there's no end to the demands of Maya. Maya, kamadinam katida durlidas durnideshas, tesha maya jata na karuna. So Maya is never merciful to us. She never stops her demands. She always justifies whatever we do. And after we do something wrong, then she never forgives us. Even though we justify that we did, Maya will tell us we did it was all right, but Maya will torment us. Why did you do it? You didn't do it the way I wanted you to do it. You made a mistake. Why did you make a mistake? You're an insult to your false ego. Your false ego has been hurt by your mistake. You rascal. You were never good enough for me. I've tolerated you for too long. Why don't you surrender more and actually serve your false ego the way it deserves? So Maya has so many tricks, yoga chalati manasa, and the soul, when it's under the spell of ignorance, when it has no higher alternative, it thinks that this is the best we can do. This is called different levels of illusion, whether mudha or naradama or maya pritigyana or asam bhavam ashritya. The thoughts of the mudha are, there's nothing beyond eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And the thoughts of the naradama is, yes, there might not be anything beyond eating, sleeping, mating, defending, but we should do this in style, not like the animals. We should cut our our dead animal with a fork and knife and have a napkin to wipe the blood off our lips. Because we should be more sophisticated than an animal. So this is called Naradama. And Maya Apritigyana means that people have the nerve to imply that there might be a God, but we know that everything came out of nothing, and we can prove it. We have spent billions of dollars to prove that black is actually white, and that white is actually black. And anyone who doesn't agree with us must be a terrorist, a pervert, a deviant, worthy to be tortured and put into jail for their implying that white is not black and black is not white. So that's called Maya Pritigyana. And Asarambhava Ashitya means that ultimately everyone is competing to become God, but I'm actually the God. I'm actually the Supreme. And anyone who doesn't believe in that must be a asura and should be eliminated. So these are the consciousness of the persons under the spell of illusion. But if one is a devotee, like Gajendra, even if one is suffering, then one thinks, let me take shelter of Krishna. Even when one's like Dhruva Maharaj, a better material position in this world, one still takes shelter of Krishna to achieve it. Even if one wants to understand things in relation, in reality, then one takes shelter of Krishna in order to understand things properly. And even if one wants to become the Supreme, or like the Supreme, one takes shelter of Krishna in order to do so. So these are called activities that will desires, by adding Krishna to our desires, will gradually illuminate us and be able to, so that we can see things more clearly. But the highest desires, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Maya Saktamanat Partha, Yogam Yunjan Manashaya, Asamshayam Samagramam Yatagyasasi Tatshina. The highest desire is simply desire to hear about Krishna. Because if one can hear about Krishna from the right source, with the right attitude, then that sound vibration will come into our heart and illuminate us so we can understand who we are, who Krishna is, and everyone and everything in relation to Krishna. Now, for the ordinary person, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yanisha Sarabhutanam Tasyam Jagrati Samyami Yasyam Jagrati Samyati Sanisho Pashuto Mune. Yanisha Sarabhutanam. What is night, Nisha, for all living entities, is a time of awakening for the self-control. And what is the night for the self-control is a time of awakening for all sentient beings. In other words, some people want to enjoy the material nature to the fullest extent they can, life after life, and for them, there's nothing but material existence. Or some of them, they believe there's such a thing as spiritual existence, but it has nothing to do with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For them, God is a myth. Of course, everyone has their God. They have to have some God. They have to have some leader. Some people have a leader as Santa Claus is the little children's leader, or maybe the bunny rabbit, the Easter rabbit. Some leader has to be there. When Srila Prabhupada was talking to Professor Kataski from the University of Moscow, Srila Prabhupada tried to explain to him that there is a difference between the body and the soul. Professor Katasi could not understand that at all. For him, there was no difference between himself and his body. Then Prabhupada tried to explain to him in Varnashram that there should be some intelligent people in society who are clean, who are truthful. Professor Kutaski could not understand that at all. Everyone is equally foolish. Then Prabhupada said, well, actually, if you look at your philosophy, Marxism, and you look at our philosophy, Krishna consciousness, they're very much the same. Your philosophy is you're going to follow Lenin. And our philosophy is we're going to follow Krishna. So wherever Lenin goes, that's where you're going to go, because you're following his footsteps. And wherever Krishna goes, that's where we're going to go. So both yourself and myself and all of us, we have to accept some leader and follow their instructions and example. So we're following Krishna's instruction and example, and you're following Lenin's. So we'll see what happens. Therefore, everyone has to accept a leader and hear from them. Of course, in the Western world, apparently we have so many leaders. Our athletic leader that we love, our rock star music leader that we love, our politician that we love. We all have our heroes, and we try to hear from them so we can follow in their footsteps. And those thoughts pass through our mind, and because we're appreciative of those personalities, we're also willing to desire to fulfill those desires that will lead us closer to our object of love. Therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Apuryamanam achala pratishtam samudram apa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashantim apnoti nakamakami. Person is not apuryamanam achala. A person is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into an ocean, which is always being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So the material world means we hear, and those thoughts go into our mind, and they appear at a certain time under a certain association in the form of thoughts. Those thoughts, when we contemplate them, turn into desires, and those desires turn into activities. All the while, the soul is sitting there, and because he has the capacity to desire to different degrees, either he's examining thoughts, but not desiring to fulfill them, or he's examining the thoughts, and then he's developing a desire to fulfill them. And when that desire intensifies enough, then it's manifested as activities. Now, the soul is sitting there. He's not either providing the thoughts, nor the body, nor the activities, but he is providing the desire. We've gotten this body, along with the mind that we've accumulated, desires and thoughts since time immemorial. And that mind, subtle mind and intelligence and false ego accompanied us into this body. And therefore, it's programmed. Under certain conditions, certain thoughts pertaining to this body or the mind will arise, and the soul is observing them and deciding whether or not this thought is worthy to be turned in, I should desire to fulfill that desire. And if soul doesn't desire to fulfill that thought, then the thought simply comes and goes. But when the soul thinks, oh, that's a very good idea, I really like to get that, I want that, I need that, I can't live without it, it's necessary, it's me, then the soul is actually waking up and getting desirous. I need it, I need it. And Maya is observing, Krishna is observing. And then Krishna says, all right, you need it, then you must turn it into activity. I'll provide the activity through my material nature and manifest your desire as an activity through my material nature or spiritual nature. If one is desiring Krishna, an activity in devotional service, then Krishna says, okay, I see you're desiring to do something in Krishna's service. So now let me turn your desire into an activity, a spiritual activity. And when Krishna turns into a spiritual activity, however much we're intensely desire to please Krishna, then we come under the internal energy of Krishna, and it becomes a spiritual activity. As much as a materialist is desiring to fulfill his desire, then he comes under the material nature. And for a devotee aspiring to become Krishna conscious, there may be a combination of both. There's some desire to serve Krishna, and there's some other desires also. So that's called mixed devotional service. In any case, the more one understands what material nature is and what desires mean accompany material nature, the more one understands what spiritual desires are, then the more one can gradually choose spiritual desires in two ways. Tesham sadatam yuktanam bhajantam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upyanti te. To those who are constantly devoted. So there's a factor of steadiness. We may not be overwhelmingly enthusiastic all the time to fulfill spiritual desires. As a matter of fact, we've grown accustomed to fulfilling certain material desires. They seem completely natural to us, and they seem part of our very personality. And we actually get some happiness by fulfilling them. But if one is able to recognize them and decide not to fulfill them, then the result is material nature tells us that why are you leaving me? Why are you giving up what causes you happiness? Why are you so disrespectful? Material nature will make us feel guilty, will make us feel like we're missing something. Material nature will make us feel like we shouldn't give this up. It's a vital part of our personality, of our existence. But if one is able to tolerate by seeing things properly, then one may try to substitute a desire in order to get a higher taste by coming under the internal energy of Krishna, so that one can forget about the desire that one has left behind. It's not enough to just give up a desire. The desire comes through the mind, I want that ice cream. And then we say, no, I'm not going to take the ice cream. I refuse to take it. And the Maya says, why? Please give me some good reasons. Well, because I just don't want to take it today. No, come on, you need ice cream. You've been having it every day for the last 20 years. Why are you becoming so disrespectful to your senses? No, I just don't want it. No, Maya says, please give me some good reason. So one can go on speaking to Maya for 3 hours why you don't want the ice cream. So then the more one thinks like that, the more one desires ice cream. The more one focuses one's mind and attention on ice cream, then the more one desires it. It's like that man, the two sadhus were crossing the river, and one old lady came and asked one of the younger sadhus if he would help her cross the river. So the young sadhu, out of compassion for the older lady, agreed and put the older lady on his back and crossed the river. When they got to the other side, he put this old lady down, and him and his companion continued walking. But finally, when they got some distance, the other sadhu turned to the one who carried the lady on his shoulders and said, "How could you have done that? She was a woman. Didn't you see she was a woman? How could you have carried her?" So the sadhu who carried the woman said, "Well, I only carried her a brief time across the river, but you've been carrying her in your mind ever since then." So the more we argue with Maya, it's like if you try to trap a crocodile and you put its jaws with your strong hands, you close the jaws of the crocodile so he can't open them. You may do that successfully for some time, but after some time, it's more likely that the person holding the jaws of the crocodile down will grow tired. And when he grows tired, the crocodile will open his jaws and have a good meal. Similarly, if we just restrain our desires from material desires, then after some time, we'll grow tired of fighting with our material mind and we'll fall victim to it. Vishwamrita Muni, for 60,000 years, controlled his mind in meditation. But it's not the most exciting thing to do, to control our desires. Therefore, when Indra sent Menaka to allure him from his meditation, just by hearing her ankle bells, he became a victim. So it is not enough just to try to give up material desires. It's absolutely necessary to develop spiritual desires as we fulfill our material desires as necessary. That should be our aim. Fulfill material desires as necessary, but at the same time, try to add Krishna consciousness, try to add Krishna to the reason why we're doing everything. Try to do something to please Krishna. And then gradually our Krishna will take away the illusory energy from us. We have no real problem except for the fact that we're influenced by the illusory energy. And we're only influenced by the illusory energy because we desire to fulfill the material desires. But we can't give them up unless we gradually add Krishna. And when Krishna sees that we're trying to add him to our lives, then he gradually enlightens us. As we become more steady and more enthusiastic in devotional service, and Krishna first assists us by giving us some intelligence, some realization of who we actually are, who everyone is, how to act in such a way as to act as devotionally. And by those devotional intelligence, by those devotional activities, by those devotional desires, then this is a higher taste, higher than any material experience. Vishaya vinivartante, niraharasidehinam, rasavarjam rasopyasya, param drishpa nivartate. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains, but ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, one becomes fixed in consciousness. Therefore, in summary, we ourselves are eternally situated as the souls in any situation, even in the material existence. But there's a big machine that we're in, which has a gross part called the senses and a subtle part called the mind, intelligence, and false ego. So we have to hear how to utilize this present mind, how to utilize this present intelligence, how to utilize our present ego, how to utilize our present body in such a way as to gradually wake up and understand who we actually are and how to act even in this world in such a way as to revive our dormant love for Krishna and love for everyone and everything as it related to Krishna. So this depends primarily on who we associate with, because who we associate with, either physically, when we're in association with other people, or nowadays we have this internet, or we have books. We have so many different ways of associating. But according to who we're associating with, who we're listening to, this will give us ideas. And these ideas will develop into desires, which will develop into activities, which either will liberate us if we hear from the right source, the right attitude, or they'll bind us to one of the modes of nature, perhaps goodness, perhaps passion, or perhaps good ignorance. In any case, it's our decision who we want to hear from, where we want to put our attention, and who we want to give our love to, who we want to give our service to. That's our choice. Srila Prabhupada has come and given us this literature. He's given us his example. He's given us association with other like-minded devotees. And we can utilize that to either liberate ourselves, or we may not take full advantage of it. And we may make some advancement, but we may still remain conditioned by taking example and taking association and shelter of others other than Krishna and his representatives. So that may be a gradual process, but because Krishna consciousness is the highest taste, even a little bit of taste in Krishna consciousness will inspire us to go on with the process, so that in some time in the future, we'll become completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness and therefore not become distracted by other ideas or other influences. So I'll stop there. Thank you. The verse was Nadate kasuchet papam, na papam sukritim vibhu, agyane nabritam gyana, taena bunyati jantava. Nor does the Supreme Soul assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers the real knowledge. So thank you. Any questions or comments?
Maharaj, I have a question. This is Lavanga. May I ask a question?
Yes.
I have read today in the 10th canto, Srila Prabhupada is translating a very interesting way the Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. I'm reading the Damodara Lila, and he says that the intelligence which Krishna gave to Mother Yashoda when the milk spilled, that he interprets your favorite verse as Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. I will tell you what to do first and what to do next. Not that I will tell you what to do. I will, set up the priority of what goes first and what goes next. And for me, it was a very interesting find. So could you please expand on, I understand that it's not, renders useless the actual giving the intelligence, but I always have trouble, like I don't hear Krishna whatsoever, but the priorities sometimes are arranged in such a way by him that is very helpful. So this interpretation is very interesting to me. Could you please expand a little bit more so that I would remember? I hope your explanation of intelligence as what comes first, what comes second, and the role of the priorities in getting the intelligence.
Well, intelligence is Buddhi Yogam, is all-inclusive. It means that, for instance, when we're walking on the street, we know we're supposed to put one foot and then the other foot forward. There's a priority. Generally speaking, most people don't put the same foot forward time after time. They realize they have to go from one to the next. So Krishna is also supplying that intelligence. Of course, sometimes it begins with some hearing, some knowledge, and that knowledge turns into a habit. When we perform the activity repeatedly, it turns to a habit. And after some time, the habit turns into a character. So it's a question of either consciously or unconsciously hearing from Krishna. Everyone's hearing from Krishna. It's not possible to exist without hearing from Krishna. But what Krishna thinks is best, that's different from just hearing from Krishna, fulfilling our desires. So when one is engaged in devotional service, Krishna explains what he thinks is best. And that may be, we can question Krishna, what's the best thing to do? And a little bit more than that, we may ask him not only what I should do now, what things I should do now, but what order I should do them. So that's more advanced. It's not only asking Krishna what he wants me to do, but what order he wants me to do it. And then even more advanced than that, what attitude should I have when I'm doing them? How should I see things? How should I do it expertly? So there's no end to the quality of the intelligence Krishna can give us, or the amount of intelligence Krishna can give us. Even Krishna's intelligence eternally is expanding in devotional service. So for the soul who's taking shelter of Krishna, Krishna will give all kinds of intelligence. Intelligence is multifaceted. It's not just one intelligence, that this is like this or this is like that. There's many phases, facets to intelligence. Emotional intelligence, discerning intelligence, discriminating intelligence, so many different types of intelligence Krishna will supply. Therefore, devotees daksha, he can do many things in Krishna's service in many different ways, expertly, because it's all being done to please Krishna. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Guru Maharaj, thank you so much for the class. I want to ask you, when we don't have the environment very favorable, even though we have a right conscious, we can get affected by the favorable environment in spite to perform our devotional service.
Depends on the example of a big fire and a little fire.
Sorry, breaking up a little bit.
Okay. So the big fire, if you're a big fire, then no matter what you put into the fire, it's not affected. Put a lot of wood into the fire, and it's not going to be affected. If you're a smaller fire, and even you put a few pieces of wood, it may become affected. So it depends upon how Krishna conscious we are. The more conscious of Krishna we are, the more we remain unaffected in any circumstances. The more we can see everyone and everything in relation to Krishna and not be disturbed. Because we're thinking about Krishna, because we're actually experiencing Krishna consciousness, therefore the material nature doesn't really affect us. But we can judge our advancement by how much we're affected, that's all, by the material nature. And rather than becoming disappointed, we should judge what kind of circumstances I should put myself under so I can continue on with my devotional service and not become affected by it, by the material circumstances. So Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita that we should try to arrange our life in such a way that throughout the 24 hours of the day, we cannot help but think about Krishna. And the Lord's promise is that if such a devotee, he's sure to go back to the spiritual world. So sometimes voluntarily, we may put ourselves in a circumstance which is not comfortable, but we do so in order to serve Krishna. And then generally speaking, Krishna will supply us sufficient spiritual strength that we'll be able to overcome those obstacles and those circumstances. But we should do that in such a way as that we don't overestimate our ability to serve Krishna, and we don't underestimate it either, so we become lazy. So we never put ourselves in any kind of circumstance where we have to rely more upon Krishna. But we don't put ourselves in a circumstance where we don't overly depend upon Krishna to the extent beyond our actual real desire to do so. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Gaur Prahladananda.
His Holiness Prahladananda Swami Maharaj ki.
Да, спасибо большое, Гуру Махарадж.
Спасибо.
Спасибо.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.